The Bishop of Oxford, the Right Reverend Dr. Stephen Croft, has become the first serving senior bishop in the Church of England to publicly call for the Church to bless and conduct same-sex marriages. Croft said he previously held an orthodox Christian view on marriage, but has slowly but surely experienced a change of heart and mind. He was then joined by the bishops of Worcester, Dudley, who in a joint letter said the time had come for the Church to honour and celebrate same-sex relations. So is it time for the Christian teaching on homosexuality to change? Is that possible? Joining me now is Right Reverend Humphrey Southern, Honorary Assistant Bishop of Oxford and Principal of Ripon College, Cuddesdon. First of all, my Lord, thank you very much for joining me. I genuinely appreciate this. We invited a number of bishops and none of them were willing to come on and proclaim the gospel to the audience or even to defend their position, so I really do appreciate you coming on. Can you start by please letting us know what is the Church's current teaching on this issue?
Can I start by asking, thank you very much for having me, but I'd much rather not be my lord. I'd much rather be Humphrey, which is the name I was given at the font. Thank you. The teaching, the traditional teaching of the Church has been, as you've outlined it, the Church has also always been called, and this is here I want to disagree slightly with what you said, always been called to engage with that which is not the Church. It's always been there to be involved in mission which must be a two-way street. There must be a genuine conversation. The kind of mission which is merely we know and you don't is arrogance and power play and not at its best what the Church is called to. So on this matter, as on others, the Church has engaged with, has listened to, has learned from the experience of people in the wider world. And this, as the Bishop of Oxford has encouraged us to think, is a legitimate way of doing our theology, a legitimate way of trying to speculate and discover what may be the will of God in changing circumstances and in a changing world. So I think that to see this as part of a developing engagement and conversation is an entirely reasonable way of going about it and doing our theology.
I'm with you on a number of points. I absolutely agree. Of course, the Church should be engaging with all different kinds of communities, but shouldn't be adopting teaching based on that. And, you know, it's not arrogance to say, we know, you don't. That's not the message of the Bible, is it? The message is that we're all saved, and it's about us bringing the gospel to people, not necessarily changing our lifestyles to match other people's lifestyles. Is that not the case? But to push further on this, you know, the Bishop of Oxford has called to change doctrine. He admitted that it is doctrine, and he's asked to change church teaching on this matter. Do you support the Bishop of Oxford's call to change our teaching?
I think it's really important to listen to the whole of what the Bishop of Oxford has said. The Bishop of Oxford has asked for us to enable this to happen, to enable the blessing of same-sex unions and to enable the marriage of same-sex people. He's also equally and just as significantly, I think, acknowledged that this will not be the way for all and that there needs to be a way in which the Church can manage and live with a diversity of practice. I think it's very interesting that in so much of the summary of his long and thoughtful essay, so little attention has been given to that very significant part of it. That actually, as has happened in the case of other contentious issues, where the Church has learnt from the society which it is here to serve and to engage with, like, for instance, the role and authority of women, there has been provision made both for those who want to move in a more creative and you might say liberal way, and space made for those who are more cautious and indeed more traditional. And so Bishop Stephen has been very careful to say that we need to respect both. It's not just about changing doctrine and forcing people to put up.
I acknowledge that. I did read the entire report, and I did also put a long, lengthy response to it. So I'm not cherry-picking parts of the report. I did consider it all. But I do want to put the question to you, because this is more than just marriage, of course, because marriage is for several purposes. The Church has always taught that sex should only be taking place within a marriage and has two purposes, for procreation and for bringing together husband and wife. And gay sex does not fulfill those purposes. So how can that be accepted? Or is that not part of this?
It's part of the traditional teaching of the church that marriage is there to build up society, actually, and that's very clear from the preface to the marriage service in both the Book of Common Prayer.
But you're not
and
denying
more
those 2
modern
points that I
liturgy.
put forward that are in the Catechism, are you?
No, but I'm looking at the liturgy, and the Church of England, its doctrine is held by the liturgy, and the liturgy is quite clear that there are several purposes for marriage, which include the two that you mentioned and others. Significant amongst which is building up the fabric of society, and I think that I think that it is quite important to look at the whole of that.
Okay. Well, I don't have it all day, but I do appreciate you coming on, and I wish we could spend more time talking. But Humphrey, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Now let's turn to my panel to debate whether it's time for the Christian teaching on homosexuality to change. Joining me is Reverend Michael Corran, Anglican priest and author, and Gavin Ashenden, the former chaplain to Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II. I'll start with you, Father Gavin. Do you think it is only a matter of time before the Church of England allows gay marriages to be conducted in churches? And if so, what would that mean for the Anglican communion?
Oh, yes, it's been the plan for quite a long time. They're only going through the motions of consulting, and so there's no doubt at all that that's exactly where they'll end up. The difficulty I had with Bishop Southam was that it sounds very laudable to want to consult society to see what society wants. But if you're a state church in which your main aim is to provide a kind of comfort blanket spirituality, well, of course you would do that. But the problem with our society is that it's profoundly flawed. We're in the middle of a period of serious sex addiction. We've elevated romanticism and erotic experience to the form of demigods. And the outcome of this has been really very poor indeed. People's psychological health, the stability of families, the well-being of children have taken hits in such a serious way that it really ought to give us time to stop. So the answer is the project is very badly flawed.
We'll pause there. And Father Michael, if you could respond to that.
Yeah, by the way, if you want to call me your lordship, you can. I'm fine with that.
I did find that quite antagonistic. He is a lord and his title is the Right Reverend, but, call me Dave, whatever.
It will never have to be, so I'll take what I can get. Look, people have no idea who I am. I'm a Brit, obviously, originally. I'm a Canadian priest. I'm a boringly straight man, the father of 4 children, married for 35 years. And until about 10 years ago, I was still Roman Catholic. And I suppose in many ways, I was the poster boy for opposition to equal marriage, to same-sex marriage. I hope I presented a fairly intelligent and reasonable opposition to it. But I had a radical change of heart and soul about this issue. Now, I've heard a lot of words used, very beautifully by you two in particular, but I'm not sure if I agree. We're talking about the terrible demise and decline of contemporary society. As an historian by training, I can't think of a time in history when people haven't said the same thing about the culture in which they live. We face many, many challenges. And I would agree there is an obsession about sex rather than sexuality that is dull and boorish, but we're not talking about that. And those people who simply want to enjoy themselves doing whatever they want to do without any responsibility or consequences, they're not the issue here. The issue is Christians who happen to be born gay, who want to celebrate their lifelong commitment before God in a church. Now, I've written an entire book about this. I don't want to bore you for too long.
Well, let me push you on one angle of that, Father Michael, because is it not our job to talk about sin?
Oh, golly, yes. I mean, I'm relatively conservative on that issue. I'm a creedal Christian, and I have little time for some churches and clergy who want to completely expunge that word from the vocabulary. There is right and wrong, but I would argue that what is right, what is beautifully right, is the commitment of 2 people to spend their life together in selfless and sacrificial love. I think this is a direct replica of the godly image.
Right. But before we get to that, can I clarify?
If I may continue. The church, the idea that the church, there's a certain teaching and it can't change. On the issue of divorce, on the issue of suicide, on the issue, I'm speaking from North America, on the issue of interracial marriages, there are still churches in this continent that say no, and until very recently, they were simply forbidden.
Yes, but church now you're conflating issues, Father, because interracial marriages Interracial marriage has never been an issue of doctrine, and what we're talking about is sin. And I've got my producer in my ear saying it's not as gay sex isn't a sin; it's legal. But I want to clarify that: is there a difference between sin and legality and civil legality? Because what is a sin is defined in the Scripture.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting you talk about, I would agree with you, by the way, there can be bad laws. I mean, Martin Luther King said a bad law is not a law. And that's not the issue I'm talking about. And I'm not talking about changing with society. The notion that we should change because society has changed is morally redundant. I'm talking about changing ahead of society. We need to do the right and the ethical thing. You mentioned gay sex, which is very interesting because I don't want to be too personal, but I've been married 35 years now. And in all honesty, I don't think sex is the first thing on the mind of my wife and myself.
Just sin in general.
The poor woman. Wait, let me finish. You had a long time. Let's talk about gay love. Let's talk about love. Let's talk about two.
I'm out of time now. I'm very thankful for you for coming on.
Jesus, who follow the Gospels, who are of the same gender, who are born with that attraction, want to celebrate their marriage sacramentally. Let's talk about that.
The Reverend Michael Corrin, Anglican priest, thank you so much. And we also had there the author Gavin Ashenden, who was a former chaplain to Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II. Thank you so much for both for coming on. I like Michael Corrin. We disagree on plenty, but we had lots of good conversations online. In a 52-page essay, the Bishop of Oxford, the Right Reverend Dr. Stephen Croft, said, "I am sorry that corporately we have been so slow as a church to reach better decisions and practice on these matters. I am sorry that my own views were slow to change and that my actions and lack of action have caused genuine hurt, disagreement and pain. I remain on a very steep learning curve, listening to these pain and distress that has been key in my own journey and to the changes in my own views."